Hey guys, it's Maria and welcome to a new video. So this video is an update on the pattern challenge. We are done with 20 and 30 are left. So I'll just be going through each of the ones from this phase. I like to refer to them as phases because even though it is a 50 pattern challenge, I'm seeing it as 5 different phases to just power through, maybe, possibly. And yeah, so it feels good to be done with another phase. And this one's been a strange one. Like by the end of the first phase, or like by the end of the first 10 patterns, I was so tired, but I was really excited, but like I wasn't entirely satisfied with the way the patterns looked. So in this phase, I just doubled down on figuring out how to create better patterns, or at least like better than they were, and just work on my skills, but also like spend more time, not too much, because I do tend to overthink when it comes to illustrating, but just spend enough time trying to figure out how to bring everything together. What I mean by that is that in the first phase, right, like the first 10 patterns and all the patterns that I made before this, like I did know what I wanted the pattern to be about, but I didn't, at least I think I didn't spend enough time trying to figure out the composition, because it is also a challenge in every sense of the word, but because of the time crunch, then I was just focusing on just getting it done. But in this phase, I decided that I wanted to spend a little more time on creating the motifs and figuring out what elements go in the composition, and also being okay with not incorporating all the elements I drew. I think in the last phase, I forgot which pattern number it was, but I had made a pattern with like bees and beehives, and that's where like I had the idea, wait, like it's worth spending a lot more time in the initial phases when I'm planning out the pattern. So you'll see a lot of that in this. Especially this one. It's one of my favorite patterns now, like the space one and the astronauts. I have a whole entire video on this. If you're interested, I'll link it down in the description. But this was so much fun to make. It was also really frustrating trying to make it because I was trying to figure out the repeat patterns, but I had a lot of fun making it. And I think with each pattern in this phase, I've gotten a lot more comfortable and confident in terms of technique. Other than technique too, I did try to experiment as much as I could. Experiment with different types of pattern making, but also with software. So for this pattern, botanical pattern, I decided to give Adobe Fresco a try, which I had used before. It wasn't my first time using it, but I hadn't used it in a while, like probably like a couple of years. And it was just so hard getting back into it. And I still wanted to explore it because it has the option of vector brushes or raster brushes. So I wanted to find a workflow that would make it easier to make patterns on Illustrator if I were to just draw in vectors. But I think because I hadn't really gone in with a plan other than like just find whichever botanicals or leaves like interest me and then just draw them, I also had a really hard time trying to find a sketching brush that I enjoyed. I eventually did find one, but I'm just so used to the Procreate 6B pencil. I think that's a crutch of mine at this point. But in this one, I did find my way eventually. Here you can just I was just exploring the interface, like the software, the features it has, the brushes it has, and how comfortable I am drawing with them. I did eventually realize that there is a lot of modification you can do to the brushes, like in all softwares, but in this one it's like right on the side. So once I had changed some of that, like I think the flow of the brush, then it made it a lot easier for me to handle it. Like here, like you can change taper and all of that. You can modify your brushes in Procreate or Photoshop or even Illustrator, like any software you work in, but the way you can do it in each software kind of differs. So yeah, it was good to know that was an option. I think I will use it more in the future, just so that I'm comfortable enough in the software, because I really like the export to Illustrator option, but it will require quite a bit of practice on my part, and I think next time I use it I'll probably go in with a sketch or two, probably like done by hand, like on pencil and paper or something. But yeah, here I brought it into Illustrator, and I'm just messing around, like trying to figure out how I can use this to create a pattern. And I do like making patterns in Illustrator because it's quite convenient, but there's just something about, you know, like creating a really textured pattern with like brushes that appeals to me more. I don't think I've gotten to like I don't think I'm comfortable enough with vector patterns. And to those of you who don't know what vectors are, basically like anything you make in a software such as Adobe Illustrator, it's a vector, but essentially like you can scale it up, like size it big or small as much as you want, and it's not going to lose quality. Whereas if you do something like that in like Photoshop or Procreate, especially in Procreate, like you can't size up a small thing into a larger thing, because then it's just gonna pixelate and look really bad. So yeah, I think I do want to get more comfortable doing vector patterns. I have done quite a few, but I want to get better at it and have more balanced patterns. Here I'm just exploring the existing brushes on Adobe Illustrator, and Illustrator Desktop has a lot more options here because I just wanted to do it all on my iPad. I just went in with it. And one of the things with pattern making that I do enjoy, like I love making patterns, but the part that's really fun is figuring out how all the pieces come together, and how like one composition, it might look nice as a composition as is, but as soon as like it becomes a pattern, it might be too overwhelming, or it might look too empty. So there's always like that balance you need to maintain, and I think I'm just trying to figure out my way around it, like about it. So yeah, in this one I tried using some textured brushes that exist in Illustrator. It was a fun, relatively quicker pattern. I think I had like a really busy schedule the following day, so I ended up making 2 patterns that day. So yeah, well, that's a segue into one of the things I realized while making this phase of patterns, was that I had to make peace with the fact that not all the patterns I'll be making will be super polished, or like even if they are polished looking. Like, I had to make peace with the fact that I don't have to make like everything doesn't have to be perfect. Like, it's okay to not be 100% satisfied with everything you make. I think that's something that I've always struggled with, especially when it comes to like doing art challenges, or even my sketchbook. It's like, oh, this needs to look perfect, but like there's no such thing as perfect, and there's always something you could change in no matter what you create. So I think just making peace with what you've made and knowing when to stop is something that I've been trying to learn, if only for my sanity. But yeah, so I so looking back at this, I like the creative in me is, and I'm sure a lot of you also feel this way. It's like there's always something you can change, but it's important to realize that the point at which you made this, like, this was the best you could do at that point, and that's okay, and that's why it's a learning process and journey. And yeah, I did really like the way the final turned out. This pattern was one of the harder ones to figure out. Like, I had a really hard time visualizing it. I also changed up the colors eventually on Photoshop, but yeah, I hope you like that one. Now on to pattern number 13. So this one will be an animal print pattern, and I love animals, but I'm not the biggest fan of animal prints. There's just something about them that I didn't really enjoy making this one as much. I wanted to add a bit of a twist to the zebra stripes. Like, I didn't want to do black on white stripes, so I stuck to yellow stripes on the flower because it felt more abstract. But moving on to pattern number 14, and okay, so parts of the process I enjoy other than the making of the pattern themselves. It's like picking the prompts out of the jar. It's oddly satisfying and also kind of nerve-wracking, and this one was a cute, fun one. I also had a hard time making this because I couldn't decide on what kind of flower to make, and then I decided to eventually I did chose the 2D illustrative, mostly line art approach with bold shapes, and I just repeated it. Like, fun backstory, maybe it's fun, who knows, but when I was a kid I used to have this Disney princesses coloring book, and it used to have flowers like that, and that pattern just made me so nostalgic for it. But moving on. So this pattern will be a fun one. So this one I spent a lot more time figuring out the motifs. So I chose a color scheme, scrolled through Pinterest a lot, and had not exactly a mood board, but like I went in with a plan. Well, I mean, I wouldn't call it a plan, but put a lot of effort into this one, and trying to have like a narrative for the pattern, and trying to, like, the composition, I wanted it to mean something, and it's just so much fun. And I'm planning on making a separate video on this, so more on that later. So moving on to pattern number 16. So I wonder what's next, and of course I already know, but so this one's about baby animals, kittens or puppies, but I decided to experiment with analog. So I went in with a brush pen and drew in some kitty cats, and I didn't restrict myself to just kittens. I wanted to, I kind of went in with my own interpretation of the prompts and just made a bunch of silly cats, and that's what I want to name the pattern, silly cats. And this one was so much fun. And I hadn't planned on going with such a doodle like approach, but I'm glad I did, because it was just such a nice change of pace from the highly rendered digital work that I was doing. Now we're on to farmyard animals. So this was another favorite of mine from this phase, and I didn't expect to like it, and I think that's one of the things that I'm realizing through this pattern challenge. I found out a lot of things about myself and what I do like and what I don't like, but more on this pattern later in a separate video, because I really want to like have a lot of time to talk about it. But another one I didn't expect to like, so Paisley patterns, I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did, but it all starts with the color scheme that you like. And I kept my inspiration on the side just so that I have like a starting point, a jumping off point for what I wanted it to look like. I did keep changing the colors and seeing which ones appealed to me more, and I just went in freehand and just went with it. I've also, like, since I am from South Asian culture, I've always been around mehndi or henna designs, so this felt a lot like that, like drawing one of those. So it was fun. It felt like a de-stressing doodle session, and it was just really nice. I think this was one of the patterns that I had to do, like I did 2 in a day because I knew I would be short on time later. So yeah, I had a lot of fun, but it was a lot of I had to really be careful about my line quality. If I were to change something in this, I might use a different brush going into it, because I feel like when it came to like the curves and like wherever it was turning, it would be harder to achieve that. So that's why I did go in with a more textured brush here, but maybe I could have, like experimented with other brushes as well. But this was a really fun, slightly faster pattern, and I also used a half drop repeat technique for this, which I'm relatively new to, but I'm having so much fun. Like in phase 1, like the first 10 patterns, I tried learning the half drop technique, but I struggled so much. I just couldn't, and I was like, I don't know if I'm ever gonna be able to learn this. But in this one, like, I doubled down on it, and here I am using it for quite a few of the patterns in phase 2. And yeah, I would definitely give like Paisley patterns another shot. I think there's a lot of potential in how much you can do with them, and I did end up playing around with color eventually and having different color variations of them. And if you guys want, then I can show you how that process goes, and how to make it more seamless for yourself. But yeah, I hope you like this one, and would definitely recommend trying out some Paisley patterns, because it's just so much fun. pattern number 19. And this one will be a fruit and vegetable garden. I did choose to just do a vegetable garden because the more I looked up inspiration, and yes, the struggle of getting the right shot of the prompt, as you see before you, but I chose to stick to vegetable garden because a lot of fruit gardens, like a lot of fruits, they just grow on trees or they're hanging, and I wanted it to be more of like a top view of a vegetable patch. So I had to do a lot of Pinterest research to figure out which vegetables grow on the ground. It's a little embarrassing. Like, I knew these vegetables did, but I wanted to pick ones that would visually look appealing. And it was one of those times where even though you know something, like when you need the information, your mind, it just escapes your mind. And yeah, I think I might do a separate video on this one as well, because it was just, there's so much planning for this, but it was fun. Ultimately, like, I'm happy with the end result. Now we're on to the last pattern of this phase, pattern number 20. And this one, it's a whimsical one. It's I would like to think it has a funny backstory, or not so much backstory, but yeah, I'll get into it in a bit. But it's whimsical castles and princesses. So the story behind it is, there's a princess. She has her birthday ball or birthday bash or whatnot. She's kind of super into herself. She's in a hot air balloon, and she's literally in castles in the sky, and she's flying to and from, like, she goes from place to place on her hot air balloon. So you have her parents' castle, her castle, and her traveling between them. And yeah, I thought it was funny, but it was just such a fun one. I think it's one of my favorites from this. So yeah, this is just a rundown of all my 20 patterns on mockups, so that you see how they turn out. And I would, if you're interested in patterns and all, every time you make a pattern, put it on a mockup. You'll feel so much better about yourself. And that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching.